gone the time where we decide what is good for you, what is good for you. If people of Iran wants that regime to be there, then it's completely within the legitimacy to be there, as long as
we promise that we will work night and day, mobilizing all our specialized security agencies to capture all those who participated in and planned this heinous crime to bring them to justice.
You know, and they were like, "Yeah, we just want some fresh blood. I think we need some fresh blood in politics here in the in New York City." And then they were like, "Well, you know, these are his policies, and he's a avowed socialist. Do you think socialism will work in New York City?" No, like so. Like, why did you vote for him then? Well, obviously,
Islam will continue to be triumphant until there have been 12 Khulafa, all of them from Al-Quraysh.
The God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed. Nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever.
This is my brother, my executor, and my successor among you, so listen to him and obey.
My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting.
Whoso obeys me obeys God. Whoever disobeys me disobeys God. Whoever disobeys my commander disobeys me.
The Lord said to me, "You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession."
Two systems of government, two visions for life on earth. Whichever is true changes everything. This is Christ and Khulafa.
Welcome back to Christ and Caliphate. I was on vacation for a couple weeks. Like, did anything happen while I was gone?
A lot of things happen.
bro, we were so bored. There was literally nothing to talk about.
Like, there's no like significant Middle East news things happening. Okay. On this podcast, we talk about Middle Eastern affairs from a Christian perspective, and we talk about timeless principles. Although so much is happening right now, we're basically going to be entirely in current events this week. So today we're going to be discussing Trump's deal with Israel and Iran, and we're going to be talking about a terrorist attack in Syria where Christians were killed in a church, and we're going to be talking about the prospective mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani.
Yes.
How you say that?
Yes.
So let's jump into the Trump-Iran deal off the get-go here.
What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. In case you missed it,
Even stones know what you.
it dropped 6 giant bombs on a nuclear facility in Iran and a bunch of other bombs on other nuclear facilities in Iran.
Well, out of all things, I like the name of the bomb, Tomahawk.
Tomahawks.
Yes.
Tomahawks.
Yeah, and
The,
B-2 stealth bomber dropped something called.
You know what they call those? They call them the Freedom Doritos because it looks like a Dorito.
But it doesn't have the pointy end, does it? Yeah, it's round. You know, it can bounce back.
Yeah, I guess.
It didn't bounce. So, well, I think there is a lot of uncertainty in my mind, at least. You know, I am a very skeptical person when it comes to making a conclusion about certain thing and seeing a lot of red flags. It's just like United States informed Iran that we are going to bomb your places, and there are a movement of trucks with God knows what they did there, you know. And then when Iran responded, they told United States that where are we going to hit you and so on and so forth. So I think in the midst of all those things, I don't know who achieved what, because Iranians are celebrating their victory too. I am seeing lots and lots of posts about Iran that they said we stood fast and we defeated Israel and we defeated United States and all that stuff. So everybody's celebrating victory. At the end of the day, maybe it's a truce within these 3 countries under the table or something. I don't know. On the surface, it's very unclear. It's very foggy.
Well, in some ways, a war that everyone can feel like they won is probably the best case scenario. But I think here's the thing. Every country in this scenario has some things they can own. as being victories. Like Israel's military victories were enormous in this conflict. It was crazy how much they achieved. They killed like 30 generals. They destroyed their air defenses. They got rid of most of their ballistic missile capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Iran, though, can say that we made the Israelis feel pain in this, and they really can. Like, they killed people in Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
But what you'll also notice is that everything Iran hit was civilian targets,
Right.
which in a military setting does not constitute any kind of strategic victory.
Right.
Like, they didn't blow up any IDF assets, right?
They don't have the capacity to.
Right, they don't have the capacity to.
Right.
All they can do is make Israeli society regret attacking them.
Yes.
And so what they can say is that they got hit really hard, but they kept hitting back, and they can hold on to that.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, this war ends with Ayatollah Khamenei still in a bunker and Benjamin Netanyahu hanging out on a beach.
But there is a big ifs and buts again statement. Okay, the rhetoric was this regime is evil, right? That's how we started. Regime is evil. They cannot have nuclear bombs and so on and so forth. These two main objectives. So from Iranian standpoint, regime is still intact. There is speculations about nuclear facilities and bombs and stuff. They're like, Iran is capable of pulling this off again in a month or so, and then that report got pulled off, and there is an official statement of this and that. So one thing for certain is there is no regime change. Regime, if that was evil and wanted to be replaced, still intact, still holding on. Number two, nuclear, you could have inflicted some damage. How much of a damage? Nobody knows. Right. So what objective did you achieve out of this? Except you killed a bunch of generals and scientists, which are, again, can be replaced, I guess.
Ultimately, this will be determined like in the sort of longer arc of history, what exactly was or was not accomplished here. Like, there's a scenario where this could make Iran more dangerous, or you could have some realists take over that want to stop beating the war drums now and start practically working on fixing Iranian society.
I mean, I don't think that the United States, it was clear at the beginning that the United States was not interested in regime change because we just suck at it. Like, the United States is just really bad at it. Every time we tried to install another regime, it's failed. And I think that particularly the United States, and particularly in this administration, they're realizing that it's just not going to take, right? It didn't work in Afghanistan. They tried to do it in Iraq. It didn't work.
It's not organic.
Right. It's not an organic change, mm-hmm. Right? And the difference is that Israel's military strikes and what the United States did positioned for an organic change, but it has to be organic. It has to be internal. So that being said, I think everything in the Middle East is about saving face. I think that President Trump is about saving face. I think that the idea of the United States trying to save face if they didn't take out the nuclear facility, I think you're right. I don't think that this is going to get borne out, in the next couple of weeks. I think it gets borne out in the next couple of years. I think all of the uranium is safe. It was taken away before the strikes. I don't think that the idea was to eliminate the uranium. It was to eliminate the facilities. And I think for the most part, the facilities that aren't underneath a mountain are pretty much gone. And the scientists are gone. There was talk about Russia helping them enrich uranium past this point. I don't know if everyone realizes it, but to get uranium strong enough to power a nuclear reactor, it only needs to be like at 3 to 5% radioactive. For weapons grade, over 60%, and they were already there. They're at like 80, 85, 90, and the closer you get to that, the higher the number it gets, the faster it happens. So, that being said, I think you have to look at it in terms of like real winners and real losers. And I think that Iran is the real loser here, because I think that from where they were and what they were threatening to do, and the military capacity that they lost, I think could be crippling to them. I don't know if the regime goes away. It's the best thing you could hope for is the regime going away and there being reform. The regime is not going to reform itself. This regime has they're just not going to do it. It's too hardline.
Yeah, I would add something to what you said, Ibars, is the inside story is, or based on some evidences that I looked at, and it's that Israel and the United States wanted organic change from within Iran. Of course, the ultimate motive was to replace the Ayatollah's regime. That's given. If you want to beat around the bush and say, no, this was not the case. No, it was the case. The problem was how you want to implement that change was not accomplished because Ayatollah was still Khomeini's regime, IRGC was still very much in control of Iran. You hear the voices in the United States from Iranians, Pahlavi's followers. Those vouch for a change, and based on that, we assume that all Iran is like that. But that's not the case. Maybe there is a lot of people opposing his view, but still they are under a lot of scrutiny and strict action. So that's why it was not able, the U.S. was not able, or Israel and U.S. were not able to pull this organically. So that was, I think, then they agreed on something. You take some blow, we take some hit. Let's call it a day. That's how it all ended.
I actually feel like, when Trump went to Saudi Arabia, I think that opened the door for a lot of these things. Like you have to look at all of the changes that happened within the Trump administration after that visit.
Mm-hmm.
Elon was gone, right? Like, they went a completely different direction with what they were going to spend money on versus what their first, 3 months of what they were doing domestically changed. And then, the way I've said it is, would you rather have the world's richest man as your ally or the world's richest country as your ally, right? So Elon could run out of money real fast. The Saudis are not going anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that when you talk about it in terms of like what the region wanted, right? And what they were willing to open up to the president behind closed doors held a lot of weight. So people are looking at it like it's just Israel and just the United States. I don't believe that. I don't believe that for 1 second, because if you've been paying attention to everything that's happened, particularly like with oil prices and everything else like that, oil is at $60 a barrel. That's like after 9/11 that happened. So oil's super cheap right now. It should not be cheap. Like the supply has like shifted.
And gas prices are still at $5 here.
I know, but that's Washington.
Yeah, that's just city tax.
So let's just take a minute and talk about the plan, right? The rumored plan. You want to talk about
So
that? We'll do that in a different.
Let's do a different episode for that. But basically, there's rumblings of the Abraham Accords being extended, the beginnings of a two-state solution,
Right.
Syria and Saudi normalizing with Israel.
Yeah.
What I would say is great and praiseworthy about this American operation in Iran. America's involvement in Iran did not start World War III.
Right.
It's a military action which involved the death of 0 Americans and 0 Iranians,
Right.
and results in a ceasefire.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that is, even if it's all projections, it's the good kind of projection, right?
Right.
Because it's the it projects us as to say, we are not afraid to fight, but we want peace.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what a government should be.
Right. We didn't, I mean, there's a carrier group out there, but we didn't mobilize 30,000 troops. You know, we're not trying to establish a beachhead on any one shore. I mean, that's a huge step. I think this is defensive more than it is offensive. I think it's like, if you're going to threaten to nuke us, we're going to show you what we can do, right? Like, after negotiations, of course. But
so basically, if Iran becomes a country with the same sort of disposition, we're willing to fight, but we want peace.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a scenario that we can work with that.
Yeah, if we still have time, I want to ask this question: that if the regime stays in, how sure we are that there is peace in Middle East?
I think that with the current regime, it becomes harder to make peace in the Middle East, but it's not impossible. And the reason it's not impossible are a few things. So if Iran 2 years ago, before October 7th, was the head of this giant octopus with tentacles all throughout the region, their ability to project that is severely limited.
Limited, but has ability to regenerate, regrow. That's the problem.
Yeah, but it does, but it's going to be harder. So especially with like the fall of Assad and what happened to Hezbollah in Lebanon, right? The stronger the Lebanese government gets, the harder it is for Iran to influence Lebanon.
Hezbollah, yep.
And so the Houthis are still likely to be their sort of main tool outside of Iran at this point. So if they have that ambition to continuing to try and destabilize other governments and install governments that look like them in, which has been their goal because they're a revolutionary movement, then that makes it hard to make peace. But if they're going to be focused on rebuilding Iran itself and their own internal infrastructure and don't have enough time to focus on that stuff, then if everyone else plays their cards right, there's a good chance that it could generally kind of like mellow out over time.
They have a tremendous opportunity in front of them.
Yeah, I think that's what the next week will determine, because they're opening talks,
Right.
and it will unveil there that what direction that Iran wants to take its people.
I mean, I think the thing was they were trying to leverage their nuclear program against like what the will of the world was, you know, like stop funding terrorism, stop being a state sponsor of terrorism. You know, your threats against Israel and the United States are not helping anybody at this point. And I think that the sentiment in the Arab world, you know, it's not like the Arab world loves Jews or anything, but there's a much louder than I've ever seen it sentiment that we need to move off of this. You know, we need to recognize Israel and we need to move off of this, and we need to not keep harping on like how we're going to annihilate these people. So, you know, it's hindering everyone's growth, right? It's hindering everyone's progress. I think President Trump tapped into that in Saudi Arabia, tapped into that sentiment. And I think that sentiment was loudly expressed by, you know, the Emiratis and the Saudis, and, you know, even the Qataris seemed open to it. The Syrians seemed open to it. You know, the Turks are not. Hey, that's
but
Turks and
yes, Israelis can go to Turkey with no visa.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Like Americans last time I went had to pay for visas.
Yeah, it's $35, man.
We do not recognize the Zionist state, but no visa fees for Turkey.
The trade between Israel and Turkey is like it's hundreds of millions of dollars a year. The two countries cannot survive without each other. Yeah. But anyway, that's a different point. Just to be on, I don't think that the pessimist in me, I don't agree with you. I think that there will never be peace as long as the regime is there. I'm not saying that means that the United States or any other entity has to step in and remove that. I just don't think that a movement that is that ideological is going to be willing to just change course.
Okay, so here's my argument. I agree with you, presuming people who hold the ideology are in charge.
Right.
Like, so I think a popular uprising against Khomeini right now is unlikely. But what I would say what's way more likely would be some shrewd general basically taking the car keys away from grandpa.
Yeah, but that shrewd general has to be very, very strong. That's the problem.
They have to be strong, and they have to. And
Are there any left?
so there's going to be a power vacuum in the Iranian government right now, and so somebody may see that opportunity and see who they could be, right?
Yeah.
So if you use MBS as a template, then the Saudi royal family and the way they changed Saudi Arabia, they had strategy and patience.
Right.
And so you had Saudi Arabia didn't have a revolution to get where it is.
Mm-hmm.
It had a cunning strategy by the Saudi royal family, which sent their people overseas, gradually started building good relationships, and then built legitimacy, kept enough legitimacy with the religious people until they had enough power to outmaneuver them, right?
Yeah.
So you could have some general in Iran who does that, and that's not an idealistic thing. Somebody who wants power and prestige, the normal things that generals and political leaders want,
Sure.
could see that pathway open to them,
Okay.
and actually act.
My theory, if that happens, is that Iran will become more like Afghanistan prior to the Taliban.
Yeah.
It'll just get super factional. The generals will fight each other. Different groups within it will all be vying for power. It weakens them, and then it sets the stage for, like a Shia 12er ideological comeback.
Could happen.
Could happen. Anything could happen, right? But, the prayer is, right? Like you're asking, like, Lord, just an end to the war, right? End the wars, bring peace.
Yeah, to end this, I would say one thing, that if there is a change to come, it has to come from within Iran.
Right.
Right. We are gone the time where we decide what is good for you, what is good for you. If people of Iran wants that regime to be there, then it's completely within the legitimacy to be there, as long as it doesn't bother its neighbors, right? It's just cut your wings, stay within your bounds, and we are okay with if you have the Islamic system, as long as people want it. Right? It's not my wish, your wish, or his wish. It's the people who live there. So I think that's my take on the last point here.
Another unfortunate thing that happened this last week is that there was an ISIS suicide bomber in a church in Damascus, in Syria. I don't know if it was Damascus, but it was in Syria somewhere.
Yeah.
What have you guys heard about this? What's going on in Syria? Is this signaling that a huge persecution of Christians is coming in Syria?
So a couple of Turkish pastors that I follow were right on top of it. Like, they were posting pictures of it right after it happened. And this is definitely targeted. I mean, that was all their opinions. This is heralding a persecution of Christians. Whether or not that's accurate or not, as time will tell. But I think the problem is that you don't need the government to sanction it, because you have enough rogue actors inside of Syria to be able to do that kind of thing. Like, you have enough factions that are still floating around to try and, like, okay, so let's just say the government is trying to move towards stability, right? We've seen Al Qaeda do this before. We've seen ISIS do it before. You attack the sitting government's stability, and then you try to destabilize them and implement your own agenda through violence. So I think regardless of whether or not the government is in on it, I think that Christians, it's probably open season on Christians.
Yeah, and I think, Syria just came out of civil war. Right now, there are remnants of instability still there.
Sure.
Right. Of course, Giuliani, if you see Giuliani And if you look at his background, of course, there is some shady business there. But right now, he is filtered through the lens of Western eyes and, baptized and so on and so forth and put on a throne. So he, of course, serves Western interests. And that involves protection for all minorities, including Christians and Zaydis and whatnot there, right? Just to remind you that the Shia sect that is there is not considered Muslim. So the Bashar al-Assad's people,
The Alawites.
yeah, Alawites. So Alawites are not considered Muslim, so they are a minority there too, right? But this government, new government, I'm so hopeful that these type of things can happen anywhere. It's not just Syria. It can happen in Pakistan. It happened in Pakistan. It can happen in UAE or even in the United States. God forbid.
God forbid.
But given that it is from that region which has been notoriously known for these type of things, it raises alarms for a lot of people that, the wave is coming again.
Yeah.
But I think it's just it will take some time to just manage all the things in that country and bring stability and peace. Well, it's a long road that will take. So I think,
Yeah. Sorry.
I think Jelani is on the right track. I guess that's what I'm feeling.
His statement on this, he says, "We promise that we will work night and day, mobilizing all our specialized security agencies to capture all those who participated in and planned this heinous crime to bring them to justice." He says, "This attack reminds us of the importance of solidarity and the unity of the government and the people in facing all that threatens our nation's security and stability."
Exactly. That's what
I mean, I think that what the people that I saw, in Turkey and other Syrian believers that I've met, particularly over the last couple of months, they've been, okay, fine. Like, Syria was safe, quote unquote, for Christians. Okay, it was safe, quote unquote, for Christians, but it's still oppressive. Turkey is safe, quote unquote, for Christians, but it's still oppressive. So I don't fault anybody for defaulting to cynicism, right? Because they've just been under like a kind of pressure that we don't get here in America as Christians, right? Or the West, really. That might be shifting in certain countries in Europe or whatever, but for the main point, if you're telling me that the leader of Syria, who used to work for Al-Qaeda, is pledging to hunt down other Muslims, and I'm a Christian, and I'm trying to sit there and say, okay, they just blew up this church. This is just another thing that like kind of serves that feeds the trauma in my psyche to make me not trust, right? So, it would be great if he actually did it, and I hope he does it, right? Like, I'm not being cynical in that. I'm just trying to see it from the standpoint of like, if you're a pastor in southern Turkey, a couple hours away from the border, what do you think is going to happen? How do you think Muslims around them are going to interpret that action? What does it feed, and how does that affect you?
I think one thing I would clarify here is when we say Jelani, and you said, how he will act on it. Syria was faction of multiple militias, and all of them are Muslims and fighting against each other.
Right.
So Jelani was fighting against its own Muslims.
Yeah. Now he's in control.
I would actually argue that ISIS doing a suicide bomb in a church right now is actually should be a vote of confidence in Jelani, in the sense that clearly they are not happy with the current Syrian government.
Yeah, and Jelani is very closely allied with Saudi Arabia as well. And ISIS is a common enemy for all these Arab nations. So it doesn't matter if they're Muslim, if they're Shias, if they're Sunnis, if they're Wahhabis, God knows what they are. At the end of the day, if they are bringing chaos to the streets, which Syria has seen for a long, long period of time. I think it's time for whoever is sitting on the top, Julani, Nourani, whoever that is, right? He has to act. He has to act in a very solid way that put forwards a example that if you hit our minorities, you will have that type of a sentence or action on you.
Yeah.
First it's the Christians and then it's you too, right?
And I think the simplest explanation is the best one here, that Syria is a fractured state that has a fairly weak central government right now that's kind of could be on the verge of stability but isn't there yet.
Right.
And because it's not doesn't have stability yet, that just puts people in more danger.
Right. Well, I mean, instability anywhere, political instability, but particularly like the Middle East flavor.
Yeah.
Political instability.
But I also think, to quote Littlefinger, chaos is a ladder. So I think if Christians right now have a cynical attitude,
Just get us up for a second. I really appreciate that reference.
Game of Thrones, by the way, Littlefinger.
Good.
but there's instability, there's opportunity, things could go good or bad. But if Christians have an attitude towards seeing, okay, the Syrian government isn't going to be on our side, it's not going to protect us, that is very easy for that to become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Sure.
And I would say early on in Islam, you had some people with hardcore thinking with Omar conquer Syria, right? Omar was a strict Muslim. Christians could not be in the government, although they had certain rights and were protected. However, Muawiyah, the guy that came after Omar, so two caliphs after Omar, right? So you have Uthman, then Ali, then you have Muawiyah.
Mm-hmm.
Muawiyah's right-hand man was a Christian. Christian life for Christians in Syria got better under the government of a man who was part of the Muslim conquests. And so we don't really know who Jilani is right now, but the fact that ISIS is not happy with his government is actually a positive sign.
Well, ISIS-K is not even happy with Taliban.
Yeah, right.
Not happy with anybody.
So until the Khilafah is established, heck with your Khilafah, leave people alone and let them live their life, right?
So I think, I mean, this is awful. It's a good sign the government has condemned it, and I hope the Syrian state is able to get enough strength so it's able to do a better job preventing these things. But in the meantime, I think it's too soon for Christians to panic about Syria, as awful as this is. We've had these kind of things in the West too, right?
Sure. There was somebody drove a truck into a church in Michigan, and then got out with an semi-automatic rifle, and started shooting up the church. And somebody saw him doing it and hit him with the car, right? So first, initially, it was like the security guard shot him, but then it was like somebody hit him with the car. They didn't blow up the church, but they inflicted damage on a church. And, the assumption was that the person was Muslim. And I don't know if they are or not. The problem is that regardless of whoever did it, it does happen here. It just doesn't happen on the scale, right? So a bomb is so much more dramatic than a truck driving into a church or something like that. But it did happen, and they happened within days of each other.
Yeah.
So, I think you can expect more of this. I think that the one thing I would add to what you said was, okay, don't worry, but the rest of the world seems like it's on fire.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to find optimism in this. But I was reading Psalm 118 this morning, and it said, it's better to put your trust in the Lord than to trust in princes, right? You're supposed to move past this idea that all of these people are chaotic actors, right? And, look past that and look to God for your stability in whatever it is. And I think that's where you can find hope.
To add my comment on it, I would say that these type of things increase polarization, and what polarization results, even in United States, we have seen burning of mosques. There are attacks on mosques, and there are attacks in West as well because of certain reaction to certain things, right? So these type of things create polarization, and that's not what we want to see in here, right? We want to live with our neighbors, doesn't matter what their religion is, as long as they are respectful of our boundaries. So that's what I would say, at the end. That's it.
The other big thing in the news as far as it comes to the Muslim world this week is the Democratic nomination for mayor of New York is a guy called Zohran Mamdani. What have you guys been hearing about this?
It's a hot topic. That is indeed.
You start.
Okay. Zohran Mamdani. Well, first of all, Zohran Mamdani was born in Uganda. He is of Indian descent, but if you look back in history a little bit before partition, a lot of Indians migrated to Uganda, and Uganda holds one of Indian communities, one of the richest, wealthiest community in Uganda. So he comes from that background, and he lived in South Africa briefly, and that's a little bit of a background. I am, as myself, a South Asian. Seeing someone from South Asia taking the lead is good to see, but I do not consider anything to be perfect. I don't consider Hamdani to be a perfect guy out there, especially given that some of his views, some of his beliefs, the way he put forward the rhetorics is so absurd. And I think some of it is borrowed from Indian subcontinent, because what I'm hearing is his rhetoric is inspired by Pakistani and Indian politicians, where they make false promises or shallow promises that are impossible to fulfill, especially in this part of the world. You say free buses, free rent, free this, free this, free this.
Free supermarkets. How are you going to pull that off?
Right.
Jeez.
So yeah, on one side, yes, I do stand by him. Doesn't matter, he is a Democrat, he's Republican. I'm not buying in that, right? But at the same time, I would mention I am seeing a lot of hate on social media just because he is Muslim, just because he is brown, just based on that there is hate, and that's what I am against.
Sure. I see that. I think the problem with all of these, the opposition is not disciplined enough, because the problem, they keep kind of calling him an Islamist, which he is not. If you put his views in any group of like Islamists, like Muslim Brotherhood types in like Egypt or anywhere else in the Middle East, he wouldn't last very long.
No, of course not.
The problem with him is not that he's an Islamist. The problem is that he's a leftist revolutionary.
Socialist.
Right. That's the problem. So he'll say things like, he wants to globalize the Intifada, but that's not coming from a hardcore Islamist perspective. It's coming from a hardcore left-wing perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So my central problem with him is not having a Muslim mayor of New York City. Now, I think there are things in the Islamic worldview that might make a large range of Muslims bad mayors of New York City. But if you want to take like one of the Emirati leaders and put them in New York City, that would be amazing, right? You take Sheikh Zayed and make him in charge of New York City.
As a Jersey boy, go ahead.
Yeah, do it.
Better than any of the governors.
No, you won't like it. No, you won't like it. Trust me. If you bring Emirati here and you bring the Emirati system to New York, gosh, everybody will be on the street. Trust me. The way Emirates work, it's of course we see the global perspective,
Sure.
but living in Emirates as in their country, it's very different scenario. So we can talk about it.
Yeah, of course. But
So I'm not necessarily talking about policy. I'm talking about we've had some really crappy leaders back over there. I mean, like I'm from New Jersey, and my governor, my senator, and my mayor all got brought down in 5 years for taking bribes. Like my mayor, my mayor took 30 grand. Why would you take 30? You sold your soul for 30 grand? Are you
Gosh,
kidding me?
it has to be $1 million.
Neil Bensavengo, I hear you, buddy. Glad you're in jail.
So my issue with him is that while he looks like Daredevil, I'm concerned he's going to govern like Kingpin.
I like that reference. You know what? I think that, I hear you with the racism, but I have, coming from that area, racism is baked in. It's baked in all the way from Boston, all the way down to Florida. There's racism everywhere, and people will find somebody to be racist against, whether it's the currently black mayor, right? Or, Ed Koch, who was the the mayor of New York City, who was Jewish, right? So, the problem to me isn't necessarily just the fact that he's from another country. I have issues with, first of all, his policies. Policies, garbage. It's hot garbage. I'm not afraid to say it. Like, you're just never going to be able to pay for all the things that he's promising. You're not going to be able to pay for free supermarkets. I don't think people know what they're voting for. I saw like a man on the street interview where somebody was going on and just asking like, who are you voting for in the primary? And a couple of people said Mamdani, because first of all, nobody would come out and say, I'm going to vote for Cuomo, who went down for sexual harassment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Opposition.
that was a horrible choice as a candidate. But and they were like, yeah, we just want some fresh blood. I think we need some fresh blood in politics here in the in New York City. And then they were like, well, these are his policies and he's a avowed socialist. Do you think socialism will work in New York City? No. Why did you vote for him then? Well, obviously you didn't really know what he stood for.
Yeah, sorry to cut you. I just want to have something, but once you finish.
Okay, and I guess my other point is, this might be a little bit of a risky way to look at it, but the majority of his donations did not come from the Democratic Party. They came from like sources that are like CARE, different Islamic-backed charities. And I follow a bunch of these Emiratis online who are like, these people who run these charities are, branches of the Muslim Brotherhood. So I'm not saying he's that, because I think that he's like kind of like the fantasy of like what would happen if a Muslim and a liberal were like combined into one person. But he took a lot of money from them. And, when you listen to these guys, they're like, this is what happened in our countries. Like we allowed people who came in and they were spewing this hot garbage, probably a little bit more on the Islamic side of it than the leftist side of it. And they took money from these groups. So, if I was, but the problem is that if you say that, you're Islamophobic, right? Like if you were running against him, you say, you took all this money from CARE. That means you don't like Muslim people. I'm with you. There are plenty of Muslims I would love to see as a mayor of New York City, but from both sides, the Islamic side and the socialist side, I don't like him as a candidate. I think that where his money came from is corrupt, and I think that his policy is horrible.
Yeah. Okay. Two things I would say. First thing, looking at his policies, right, what he wants to implement, I think it doesn't work in this country, the way this country is structured. One rhetoric he used that he will take money from rich investments. So you are incentivizing people not to be rich, stay poor. That's one point. Argument number two, which is in his favor, that a lot of people are just against him because he supports Palestine cause. And of course, we live in a world of so much polarization. And first thing we hear, oh, you're a Palestinian supporter? Well, I'm going to hate you for that. And on top of that, he is Muslim. What kind of Muslim? We all know that what kind of Muslim he is, right? So there is nothing to be afraid of he being a Muslim. Number three, he looks different. Now we live in a world, James, where we don't see macro racism. Macro racism is saying something in front of your face and saying, "Hey, you look brown. I'm afraid of you. Get away from here." Right now, we live in a world where there is micro racism. There are gestures, there are expressions, there are ways to express your racism, and that's what I am seeing, and that's what is so heartbreaking, I would say, as a person from that part of the world, why you are seen just because you look certain way, just because you have certain agendas, I'm saying, certain ways to see the world. Okay, let's take his policies out of equation right now. Just, was that okay if he was mayor and was brown? I think still people will have a lot of problems.
Well, okay, sure, but the current mayor of New York is a black guy.
And the one before him was a black guy.
Yeah,
Not the one before. No, not.
One before de Blasio?
Yeah, no. I'm thinking governor. Sorry. The governor of New York was a black guy.
So, yeah, again, I don't deny that this plays into it, but I think it's really, really important for people to be precise in their thinking and their criticisms at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if there's anybody who's like generally doesn't like non-white people, that those are not in the audience for our podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Who may be in the audience for our podcast are going to be people who have a hard time differentiating different types of Muslims and what this means.
Yeah, Muslim and brown makes a lethal combo. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I gotta be honest, he looks more Hispanic.
Yeah, but
I like, again, it looks like he could have came from the Bronx. It could be related to AOC. Like, they're about the same skin tone.
But it has the opposite effect too. So because that's part of why he's so popular,
Right.
that he feels different.
Mm-hmm.
That's why everyone's excited. So that coin has two directions, right? It's going to cause some people to freak out unnecessarily, and it's going to cause other people to embrace him unnecessarily as well, right?
Honestly, like, I don't think outside of New York City it really matters. Because I think New York City is a very diverse place. It's been a very diverse place for a very long time. And I don't think, like, particularly the areas where he's going to play well is going to be like Manhattan, the people who drive in from Long Island, not Staten Island. That's a very like red area, but the Bronx, like a lot of minorities in the Bronx, like it's gentrifying. So,
What's the impact on Brooklyn?
I think Brooklyn is gentrifying too. But I think that the problem, the demographics are all shifting, but this is not new in New York City. That's what I'm saying. It's not like New York City was ever like sure, there was a white majority there, but there were tons of minorities in New York City. Mm-hmm. There were Italians and there were Irish, and at the time they were like super looked down on.
Yes,
you know what I mean? So I think that this has been going on, like the shift of minorities has been going on in New York City for like, I don't know, like 100 years now. So I don't think that that's the case. I think that the thing that's going to put him in office is that there are 4 different candidates that could possibly be on the ballot, and he's the youngest one, right? He's the youngest, best-looking guy. I don't think he's going to get the black vote. I don't think he's going to get the African American vote because the current mayor is African American, and they tend to vote, very loyally, to their race. So, I don't know who else, he's definitely going to get we want to practice tolerance and diversity vote there, and there's a lot of that.
So my basic position on this is that people should not be concerned about him because of his origin or the religious label he has, but people should be concerned by the views he has.
Policies.
Right. Because, but actually, so I think when we take Islamic political theory and it's sort of, if you take the sort of Islamist political theory, right, which exists in the world, and you take the sort of left-wing communist revolutionary ideology, both of those things are bad ideas. And a lot of the American Muslim community has kind of those things have kind of fallen together. originally it's out of an alliance of convenience, but eventually, as people are hanging out enough, babies are made, in the heat of the moment, and you have a generation of Muslims who really don't have a view that comes from classical Islamic thought. It's really coming from left-wing thought with some sprinklings of Islam on there. However, I actually think the combination of those two ideas can actually make them a little bit less deadly than they would be individually, because I think some of the left-wing ideology offsets some of the worst parts of Islam. And I do think the Islamic ideology offsets some of the worst parts of left-wing ideology as well. Not that I would say the end product is good, but I think having a Muslim socialist may be better than having someone who's just a pure socialist with no Islam, or better than having a pure Islamic candidate with no socialism.
Yeah, I think
I have a theory on it.
This new thing of combining leftist ideas with Islam, I think I see it as a reformation in Islam, right? If it starts and it's spread throughout, I think Islam would become any other religion. It will get a sting out of it, and then it's just like nobody talks about Hinduism, nobody talks about any other religion. It's just Islam because it got sting. So if you remove the sting, I think that is where it will become very acceptable.
I see this,
but every time a leftist organization has aligned with a more radical view of Islam, the more radical view of Islam wins. So this is what happened in Egypt. It's what happened in it's right on the tip of my tongue. Afghanistan. It happened in Afghanistan. There was like a move to, that's what brought the Soviets in.
Iran as well.
Iran. It's what happened in Iran.
We got to wrap up here because the camera will literally run out of juice. But here's what I would say.
But free juice.
It can happen. It can happen that's the true.
Yeah,
true.
I'm not saying
and the way that we can actually move a long way to defeating this kind of ideology is actually by being nice to Muslims and making friends with Muslims.
Sure.
Because if they feel like they have a hostile reception everywhere else in society where no one differentiates between one type of Muslim and another, then they'll inevitably go to these people. Whereas if they feel like, oh yeah, Americans like us, we're safe here, we're respected here, and then you have these socialists come along, then we're fine. We like our lives. We don't want to join you.
I mean, remember when we went to that comedy show? We went to a comedy show in Astoria, Queens, and it was all Muslims, and there was not a hardcore Muslim in the group, right? They were well, one guy was like, I have I had a trans girlfriend, crazy stuff, right? So, but unfortunately, they're the ones, and they're great, and they're funny comedians and everything else like that. But the ones who are sitting in Times Square chanting, the whole world will be Muslim, New York City will be Muslim, women will be wearing this and this, that, and that. I mean, they get all the press. So, I think it's important to not get caught up in that, and realize that in every city, particularly in America, there's a broad spectrum.
Yep. You have to differentiate.
Right.
Guys, thank you for listening to Christ and Caliphate. We'll be back next time.